I think Trump is hoping he can tempt Putin with a better relationship that ends his isolation, gives him opportunities to make his country more prosperous rather than continuing this desperate war in Ukraine.
So we've heard now Vladimir Putin say a number of times, yes, he is ready to start talking about peace. We've heard the American president saying that talks could begin immediately. Not a huge amount of faith in any of that, it seems. The British government certainly has now placed 100 more sanctions on Russian entities. Tom Keating, head of the Centre for Finance and Security at the Royal United Services Institute, told us more about the measures.
I mean, this move today is an interesting one because it's the second visit to the sanctions well in 2 weeks by the UK government. A huge number of vessels, 100 sanctioned last week, and then another round today. I think what's interesting is that the UK is moving into a space that we would certainly welcome, which is not just sanctioning vessels, but sanctioning the kind of the infrastructure around the shadow fleet. So, for example, an individual sanction for brokering sales to the shadow fleet. We've seen captains of vessels sanctioned. This basically is pressure to try and reverse the enormous growth we've seen over the last 3 years of this shadow fleet, which has come with a whole load of unintended consequences.
Not everyone's convinced that these measures will have much effect. Tom's not so sure about that.
Vladimir Putin clearly seems immune to sanctions, but I think it's important to note that the sanctions in a way are not on Vladimir Putin, they're on the Russian economy and the ability of Russia to wage its illegal war against Ukraine. It was really striking, I thought, that when Donald Trump announced his Liberation Day and sent the markets and the global economy into a tailspin, there were no tariffs on Russia. But Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, noted that even though there weren't tariffs on Russia, they were suffering from the decline in the oil price as a result of the concern about a global economic slowdown. The Russians really, really care about their ability to continue to sell oil and to raise money from oil. So whether it's the price dropping dramatically because of a global economic slowdown or people stopping buying Russian oil, they care about that, and that's what we should focus on relentlessly.
Tom Keating there from the Royal United Services Institute. Welcome to the programme now. Katie Balls, the Washington editor for The Times and The Sunday Times, on the line from stateside. Hello, Katie.
Hello.
Hi. I don't know if you heard William Hague earlier today telling us that as things stand from where he was sitting, it looked as if Putin was playing Trump like a violin. I mean, he's got a point. That's pretty clear now, isn't it?
I think there is a sense now of what will it take for Donald Trump to snap when it comes to Putin, because there is quite clearly frustration coming from the White House. I think initially, in a way, more towards Ukraine, but also towards Russia. Since we had the minerals deal signed, I think that Ukraine relations with the US have improved. But there is now a feeling that Putin is not playing ball. You have Donald Trump trying to get things moving. He, of course, said he was going to fix the Ukraine-Russia war in a day. That hasn't come to pass. Yeah. But yet, it doesn't quite feel as though the US is ready to take too much retaliatory action against Russia, even though Putin seems to be working on his own schedule and not giving much back at all.
Yeah, in frustration with Vladimir Putin, it's impossible not to see a reason, and many reasons for that. Why on earth would the White House be frustrated with Zelensky? He has done everything he's been asked to do. He went to Istanbul a few days ago, even though he didn't imagine that Putin was going to be there, and Putin was not. We had that 2-hour conversation yesterday, which yielded pretty much nothing whatsoever. On what ground can those at the White House be frustrated with Zelensky?
Well, I think we, of course, go back to the infamous Oval Office moment where you saw Donald Trump and particularly J.D. Vance effectively turn on Zelensky, suggest that Ukraine wasn't grateful enough. So there's a lot of baggage when it comes to this administration and how they view the support, particularly from the US, often with the wrong figures, that they have given or claim they have given to Ukraine so far. And you will hear senior figures in the administration say, oh, both sides have done wrong and so forth, which is very much, I think, out of kilter with the mainstream British view. And certainly, though, I think that Donald Trump loves a deal. So ever since they managed to sign that mineral deal, which took a long time to get there, if you think about the toing and froing, I think Zelensky is now seen as someone they find much easier to work with than previously. The question is, Zelensky, as you say, has given quite a lot to get there, is doing what Donald Trump wants, is turning up to these meetings, is signing deals. Putin, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be giving Donald Trump very much at all.
No.
So at what point does that mean the White House says, oh, we're going to think about sanctions, we're going to think about X? At the moment, there's certainly less warm talk coming from US officials about a new era of business relations between US and Russia, but it's not too, hit back yet.
Yeah. It's difficult to take talk of imminent American sanctions seriously when you also hear the president and other members of his senior team saying in pretty much the same breath they're almost ready to walk away from the entire process.
Something we have heard a lot. I do think there's a bit of a feeling in Washington that, there is a skepticism, I think, from lots of Republicans that Donald Trump is really willing to walk away. I think that, he wants to see himself as someone who wins a Nobel Peace Prize, as someone who can end these conflicts. So the fact they've said it enough times now, I think, well, at what point do you really walk away? Yeah. I think lots of people feel that Donald Trump is invested, perhaps is the wrong word here, but he does want this to come to an end one way or another. It's just that at the moment it's really hard to get Russia to do what they would need to make that happen.
Yeah, maybe someone should just invent a prize and hand him that and hope that gets on his good side. We shall see. But anyway, good to get your take as always, Katie. Thank you. Now I want to welcome back to the show, Fred Fleitz, who's a former chief of staff at the US National Security Council. That was during President Trump's first term. Welcome back, Fred.
To be here.
Tell me your view on what I was mentioning a little bit earlier on, the perception, and it's from William Hague, a former foreign secretary, a man of some judgment. He says that Putin's playing Trump like a violin, and he was thinking of the no-show at Istanbul, the pointless 2-hour conversation, and no doubt other things too. Surely Hague is right about that, Fred?
Well, I mean, to quote the great Winston Churchill, jaw is better than war. We have Ukrainian and Russian representatives speaking, although at a low level. They did arrange a prisoner exchange. They're going to meet again. Yeah. Trump is talking to Putin. An American president hadn't talked to Putin since February 2022. Yes. Before Trump. There's reason to be skeptical. I agree with you. Putin has been keeping his word. Trump did not get a ceasefire out of this agreement. He did get an agreement for Russia and Ukraine to talk and to come up with a memo with a roadmap to get to a ceasefire. Now, maybe that's all that's viable right now, but I think the fact that the parties are talking and the U.S. is talking to Russia, I think that is a net plus. Yeah, well,
except the problem with that, Fred, is we're getting lots and lots of jaw and lots of war. The jaw doesn't seem to be delivering anything by way of progress or even very much hope. What if you saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal today? It's by the commentator, economist Jerry Baker, who defined, if you like, the Trump doctrine, which he defined in this way, I'm paraphrasing, but it's about economic gain and self-interest for America and a certain amount of self-interest and gain for himself, shorn of ideology or any shared commitment to the principles that have defined American leadership for decades. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think so. I think Trump has changed the mantra of peace through strength to peace through strength and commerce. He said when he was in the Middle East that he wanted to see regional states exporting technology, not terrorism. But he's moving away from the previous approach of promoting liberal democracy by the United States, trying to promote stability by enriching other nations, by pushing for mutual economic growth, that we can cooperate with other nations, strike an economic deal with us, don't fight us, don't send terrorists against us. I think Trump is hoping he can tempt Putin with a better relationship that ends his isolation, gives him opportunities to make his country more prosperous rather than continuing this desperate war in Ukraine.
He's been dangling that prospect for a good long while now, and he's clearly attracted into it himself. But Putin, he seems to believe, and he's maybe right to believe, that he can have it all ways and all on his own terms. He was saying, wasn't he, on a Russian TV station a couple of days ago, that he's got the men and the munitions to carry on with this war until mission is accomplished. And mission accomplished means the surrender of Ukraine. Not much grounds for hope there.
I would remind you that Trump's been president only for about 4 months, and maybe he can be criticized for saying he wanted to end the war much quicker. But I think the foreign policy experts you usually speak to will tell you that negotiations to end conflicts like this often take years. This is going to be complicated. And U.S.-Russia relations were in a very bad state when Trump came into office. If he is going to convince Putin to stop this war, it's going to take work, maybe more work than Trump anticipated. I think it's possible, but to to fault Trump for not pulling this off in 4 months, I really think is unfair.
Okay. Now, what is your reading of the proposal by the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham for sanctions, which I read has got majority support in the Senate, in the United States Senate, across party lines? Is there a future in that, do you think?
I also think that Trump's patience with Putin is running out, and Trump is considering very tough sanctions against Russia. So I think what Graham is proposing is consistent with what Trump will eventually turn to if these negotiations with Putin don't succeed. I think before Trump does that, he is going to attempt a one-on-one meeting with Putin, maybe at the Vatican, maybe in Saudi Arabia. But I do think Trump's patience is running out.
I wonder, though, just lastly, if part of the plan might be to sanction those who buy oil from Russia. Well, China is one of the foremost nations on that list. Do you imagine that America, that Trump, that Congress would sanction China and risk reigniting that trade war?
I think Trump is already prepared to sanction China for buying oil from Iran. And I do think there would be sanctions against China. There will be efforts against the Ghost Fleet. There'll be sanctions against Russia's banks. And there will be an effort to confiscate Russian financial assets around the world.
All right, Fred, great to get your opinion. Thank you. Fred Fleitz, the Chief of Staff, former Chief of Staff at the U.S. National Security Council.